Strategy games come in all shapes and forms, ranging from the in-depth small-scale combat of Age of Empires to the more overview-style take-over-the-world type found in the Civilization games. And of course, they range in environments too, from being based in the past or present on Earth, to the future on other worlds, to the past, present or future in space. Can our game today find a place in this exhaustive list? Welcome to Total Reviews, the web show where we take a look at games of interest and see if they really are worth a purchase, in partnership with Games Planet, where you can purchase games like our choice today at a discounted rate from an officially licensed game seller. Today's focus is on Stellaris, the brand new strategy game developed and published by Paradox Interactive. Now, I wouldn't call myself an expert on strategy games, but I have played my fair share of them, having owned Civilization, Age of Empires, Rise of Nations, Command and Conquer, Company of Heroes, Sins of a Solar Empire, Homeworld, to name a few. My first experience, however, of a strategy game was back when I was quite small on a Windows 95 PC and the turn-based game Star Trek Birth of the Federation. And for a 6-year-old who understood nothing about gaming beyond Sonic, Aladdin and Lotus Challenge, it was a very confusing experience. Fast forward to 2016 and I still find myself somewhat confused with it, not fully coming to terms with the turn-based nature. Enter Stellaris. Released in May 2016, or a week ago from the time of this review, Stellaris is what we call a real-time strategy 4X hybrid sort of game. Anyone played Europa Universalis? Think that, but in space. And if you're unsure as to what 4X means, it's probably a topic of a different video. But, in basic terms, it means a game is based around the 4 X's: exploration, expansion, exploitation, and extermination. The last being something Doctor Who fans will be quite familiar with. But before I get more into the gameplay, a quick look at the specs needed. Recommended specs are not much, with either a Phenom 2 X4 running at 3.3 GHz or an i3-2100 at 3.1 GHz, being plenty to enjoy it. 4 GB of RAM mean that this game has a low footprint, and a mid-range 1 GB graphics card, such as an Nvidia 560 Ti, will do the trick very nicely. And lastly, it needs 4 GB of hard drive space, or SSD space as we now have, so it is a little larger than some games, but significantly smaller than other games that would probably give similar gameplay times. Reading about the game from Paradox themselves, they have advertised it as featuring deep strategic gameplay, a rich and enormous diverse selection of alien races and emergent storytelling. Stellaris has engaging, challenging gameplay that rewards interstellar exploration as you traverse, discover, interact and learn more about the multitude of species you will encounter during your travels. Etch your name across the cosmos by forging a galactic empire, colonizing remote planets and integrating alien civilizations. Will you expand through war alone, or will you walk the path of diplomacy to achieve your goals? Now, at first, this sounds like a game very similar to Sins of a Solar Empire. But I enjoyed Sins of a Solar Empire, but maybe not as much as I thought I would have. Nevertheless, I decided to give this a go. Loading times when you boot the game are quite marginal. They're not brilliant on the first load, but subsequent loads are always normally a lot faster. And once it is loaded in, you're greeted with a very simple menu screen. It wasn't clogged up at all. My first look was naturally at the options. This is what I do in every Total Reviews episode. In fact, I do this with every game I buy, particularly graphics options, which sadly there are very few. Thankfully though, the game is not that graphically intensive, so it's not really that much of an issue. Multiplayer is also available, with up to 32 empires being able to play over LAN or internet, so that would always make a very interesting dynamic to the gameplay itself. But for this review, I'm going to be focusing on single player, as I'll be able to explore more without getting my behind handed to me. Now, I'm the type of person who values being able to customize things, and clicking on a new game did not disappoint me at all. On creating a new empire, I was greeted with a vast array of options, ranging from simple names and selecting a few dozen appearance styles to biological traits and government ethics, ship styles, preferred weaponry and travel type, and finally the all-important flag. I spent a good 15 minutes here just thinking about my choices and how it would have had a different outcome on my playstyle. And for those of you who look for a challenge, I'd recommend playing with an empire whose ethics and personality is completely against your own. See what happens. Starting a new game, I was greeted with a vast array of information. However, being used to playing games like these, Birth of the Federation, Age of Empires, etc., I was used to processing it all. Starting with the interface, it seemed pretty clean and functional, but there were definitely figures that were missing that you normally would like to be able to see at a quick glance, so maybe some work is needed there. Also, since the game is played out in some form of 2.5 to 3D, the galaxy map, which I found by accident, you press the E key or the M key, or there's a little galaxy down at the bottom that's actually clickable, which I didn't know. But once you get into the galaxy map, it's a little bit finicky to work out. For example, on the screen right now, you can see that in the video, Avaconia looks like it's in my territory. But if you look at the little hexagon, it's actually not. It's on the border of my territory, but not in my territory. This is just something you have to get used to. First time I was playing, I was a bit confused, trying to work out why is it saying it's not in my territory, and why can't I go there, why can't I build an outpost there, what's going on. But eventually you figure it out. Now, there is a tutorial system, but it does miss things out, and it certainly does not have the best ways to play the game, as every person is different. So my advice would be not to use the tutorial, work things out for yourself. I did, and after my first annihilation, I was okay. The game is based heavily on bringing up different screens of information, with F1 through F6 opening up most of the information you will require to keep your empire intact, including research, alien contact, governments and more. These buttons are also found on the information bar at the top and to the left. The rest of the bar is full of basic information such as the amount of energy available and generated, as well as minerals and influence. These are key for building and expanding your universe. Next to that is physics, society and engineering research generation, followed by strategic resources, planets and fleet size. Now, with the research generation, you have to hover the mouse over it to see how much it's built up, which is a downside in my opinion. There's plenty of space on that top bar to fit more information, so I would have expected them to fit that information in, because you do need to keep an eye on it. The O key brought up a nice sidebar called the Outliner, which is customizable, which is again pretty cool, which lists all your planets, fleets, factions in your empire. Of course, you could just customize it to not have civilian fleets or not have factions or don't show planets, however you want it, which means that with the O key you can bring up all your stats at a glance and get to anywhere you want, because double clicking on any one of them jumps you directly to their location. It's a great way of moving around, especially if you've got yourself a vast empire and you want to get 6 or 7 star systems over, and you're not too sure where that star system is, but you need to access a specific fleet that's there. Just double click it, it'll take you directly to that fleet, which I think is very, very nicely done, well thought out. Of course, this is all the tip of the iceberg. Accessing information's one thing, but actually making use of it and turning it into a meaningful game is another. Clicking on an inhabited planet brought up the planet screen where you could select governors, build and upgrade buildings on free tiles, access your army screen and recruit armies, as well as access your spaceport, which of course allowed you to build ships. This is exactly where everyone tends to start before getting their first science ship out, or going out exploring the cosmos. Clicking on any object with the right mouse button in the solar system view opens up options depending on the ship type you've selected in the first place. Now, this was a little confusing at first for me. I was clicking on a ship and then clicking out with the left mouse button and then trying to click on something else, for example a planet that seemed to have icons next to it that may indicate that there's minerals or whatever there, and I couldn't actually do anything with them. So I was trying to work out how to do this. Now, it's a little bit odd to actually work out, but what you do is you click on the ship first, and then you have to right click where you want the ship to go, and you can either get it to move there, orbit a planet if it's a planet or an asteroid or something, or depending on what the ship is, you'll have different options, either to survey, or the military will be giving options for attacking, and construction ships will be giving options for, well, constructing structures in space, naturally. And these are key to managing your resources effectively, as they generate certain resources, but also use others, either in the initial building phase or as a monthly upkeep. The challenge I found in Stellaris during my 10 hours or so that I've played so far is keeping everything balanced, expanding to avoid being swamped by alien cultures and alien empires, but at the same time making sure that I was generating enough to actually aptly defend myself and what I already had and continue growing. And if that isn't enough, research options can lead you to either becoming very offensive or very defensive. And of course, society research is also available, which allows you to either colonize the most inhospitable of worlds eventually and terraform it, or make certain the worlds you already have producing resources at a tremendous rate. There are that many different ways to play. Had enough yet? No? Okay, well, on top of that, you also have to carefully manage contact with aliens, working out who is who's a friend, who's a foe, setting up trade deals and embassies in order to create alliances, and eventually a federation. Still want more? Sure. There's a game ship designer that allows you to create new ship designs ranging from fast-moving light attack ships to extremely slow and powerful destroyers, depending on your playstyle. So make sure that each one has enough to run the ship through, because if you don't have enough power, you can't save it, and you're going to be stuck, as I was. I was trying to work out, why can't I save this? Now, I didn't actually bother reading the box that says not enough power, so there's a tip for you guys. If the save button is grayed out, and you've got a name in there, it's because you don't have enough power. It's something you do need to look at. Combining all that together gives for a game time that could easily, you could easily play this game 20 or 30 times over, at very least. And each one's going to have different outcomes and different methods needed to win every single time. Had enough? No? Well, it looks like mods are also available for this. So this is a fully moddable game, and I'm definitely going to be putting a load of mods on because I really want to explore what's available. I think a Star Trek mod would be really good, as would a Star Wars mod. That would be really, really good as well. And, plenty of different universes. Maybe a Stargate mod. That would be quite interesting. So there's all these different mods that you can have, and there are references to things like Star Trek and that in there as well. I mean, I saw Crystalline Entity, even though it didn't look like the Crystalline Entity from Star Trek, and there was also in one of the government selections, it said there, after all, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and obviously that's something that comes from Spock and Vulcan. So Stellaris, as good as it is not without its flaws though, most of which I learnt in the first 2 hours of playing. Terraforming, for example, is not exactly the best, with places such as Venus and Mars unable to be terraformed, something you'd normally expect. I'm hoping a mod comes out to fix this, or at least Paradox may be changing it themselves. Ideally, it would have been better for Paradox to have allowed maybe more planets to be terraformed, but at a very high cost instead, or maybe at a very slow rate. I'm not sure. Secondly, the ship designer is great in terms of upgrading and designing new ships with different modules, but the types of ships are quite limited. So far, I've only come across a station, a defense platform, a corvette, and a destroyer. Now, that makes for quite a limited setup in a sense, and I would have liked to see maybe 6 or 7 different ship types, not station types, ship types, to really make it a process that you'd put a lot of thought into. Maybe, you create maybe 2 or 3 destroyers and then have some maybe cruiser class ships or something like that, and then corvette class ships, and then maybe some fighter ships. And I think that would have been really, really good, and that would have also made the dynamic of the game even harder, and it'd make it a game that you could play for hours and hours and hours on end, just like that. So there is that. Oh, and considering that you can declare war on an empire, it'd also be nice to try and negotiate peace. But that doesn't seem to be possible, which does make war sort of a locked-in situation once someone declares it on you. So that's not exactly the best of things, especially against AI who don't really understand. You can talk to a human, you can't really talk to an AI. And lastly, the game did have a little bit of lag as I played at times, particularly when starting the game up for the first time in the day, but it was nothing too major, and it did seem to iron out itself fairly well as I played on. So overall, I would say that I'd like to give Stellaris a good, I'd say 80 out of 100. It's a very good game. There are things that can be improved, especially, like I said, in the game designer, terraforming, and the whole idea of war, I think needs to be improved. But generally, it's very, very enjoyable. There's lots and lots to do. It is worth buying, and like I said, if you do want to buy it, check out the link in the description box below, and that will take you to Games Planet, where you can buy it at a discounted rate and support us here at AD Studios, which I would really, really appreciate. So, thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the review. And please leave a comment in the comments box letting me know if you did enjoy the review, and if you've picked up Stellaris, I'd like to hear your opinions on it as well. I think I'm going to go and try and beat the game for once.